So risk management. We're going to take a look at the state of the practice. So when we're looking at our sourcing risk and how we're going to mitigate it, we need to first identify how the impact is. So let's look at share price, because that data is pretty easy to obtain because the financials of companies are public, at least if they're publicly traded. They have to file with the Securities and Exchange Commission their financial reports. So if we look at the share price based on the supply chain position that it impacts, we can see how the share price is affected. So internally, which happens about 33% of the time, share price will drop 10.2%. These are just some rough numbers. Now, if the supplier has a supply chain issue, which happens about 18% of the time, the company will see a 10.9% decrease. So let's say this is your company. An internal supply chain issue for your company internally, you'll see your company drop about 10.2%. If it's your supplier that has a problem, you'll see your company's share price drop by 10.9%. However, if it's on the customer side, which is probably the worst place for it to happen, which happens about 16% of the time, you'll see the company's share price drop about 13.6%. So none of these are acceptable. And you should be able to effectively manage this risk. But what about the type of disruption? Well, if it's a quality issue, which happens about 5% of the time, we're going to see a share price drop of about 7.7. If it's development, let's say new product development, it's going to drop, it happens about 5%, it's going to drop 11.6% of the time. Now, if it's a ramp up to a rollout of a new product, which happens about 9% of the time, we're going to see a 12.2% drop. Probably because marketing has already pushed this product and now you've pushed back the delivery date. So that's going to make a lot of customers unhappy. Production, which happens about 10% of the time, your share prices are going to drop 11.9%. A change order, which happens about 13% of the time. So a change order can be anything simple from changing the color to a huge change. Your share price is going to drop about 12.7%. And then part shortages, which happens about 22% of the time, you're going to see a 10.6% drop in your share price. So the stock market it really doesn't like supply chain interruptions. So if your company is publicly traded, you're going to see roughly, looking at all the numbers, about a 10% drop in your share price, which can be huge for some companies. So, what are some supply chain design issues that increase risk? Well, globalization. So we're sourcing from around the world rather than within our own country. And we're outsourcing some functions, some, let's say, production. Well, if we're outsourcing the production, do we have anybody there that's monitoring what's going on, making sure the quality is there? Clock speeds or tack time. How fast does things get produced? The customer's demand. So if the customer originally wanted 100 and now they want 1,000, that's going to cause increased risk because now you got to somehow try to make 1,000. Or you tell your customer you can make 100 as their original order, and then you can negotiate the delivery of 900 more. So that's something you can do. And then a lot of companies are starting to do what's called lean production and just-in-time inventory practices. So with this, they're trying not to overproduce, so they don't have anything extra. They're not trying to underproduce because then they won't have enough to fill their orders. But their just-in-time inventory is they have just enough materials for a set period of time for their production. And if their production changes, They might not have the materials to adjust accordingly. But there's so many risks out there. But what are the top 5 of the risks that would impact our supply chain? Well, here they are on the screen. We have quality. Poor quality is the biggest one. Inventory. We either have too much inventory or too little inventory because our forecast might not have been as accurate as we'd like it. A natural disaster, whether it's a wildfire in California, to a drought in Texas, to a snowstorm in the Northeast, or flooding in another part of the country. Natural disasters generally cannot be predicted, so we need to figure out a plan to cover those oh crap moments. And then economics. What do we do if the currency exchange rate drastically changes and we're in the contract that says we need to pay in a foreign currency? Well, if it's in our favor, great. If it's not in our favor, what are we going to do? So you got to look at those economics. And transit loss. So did it get stolen from the truck? Did it go missing somewhere where it wasn't not enough put it on the truck to begin with? We have all these things that could possibly go wrong. And these are just the 5 top supply risks. So what about, how do we reduce these risks? Well, we have some good supply practices that we can use. Picking the right supplier is going to be our biggest thing that's going to help us. And after that, we can do all of these here. So the contract language, making sure our contract is clear and anybody can understand it. We need to monitor our supplier. Our supplier may need to be checked up on every so often, so we need to look into it. Are their deliveries getting later and later and later? Or are they on time? Is the quality being maintained? Well, we need to keep a look at them to make sure they're doing it right. And if they need help, let's help them. Supplier segmentation. So how do we segment our suppliers? Are we segmenting them by a category? Saying that we're going to use Hershey's to supply the chocolate that we're going to put on pillows in a hotel. Or are we going to talk to Mars? Or are we going to talk to Walmart? Well, how do we segment our suppliers to meet our needs? And your company will decide how to do this. So we need to hedge. This could be we're hedging our bets. We know we have a good supplier because we went through a good supplier selection, but we have this backup supplier that we're going to order 20% of what we need from. That way we're not putting too many eggs in one basket with our main supplier. Or we're going to do something else. Or we're going to rotate our orders. All these different things we can do with hedging. Near sourcing. So instead of outsourcing to another company, we're going to bring that back into our company. Instead of overseas, maybe we just bring it back to the domestic market here. So we're going to try to bring it closer to us. Most of the time, near sourcing means we're going to bring it back into internally so that we perform the function ourselves instead of outsourcing it. So near or insourcing, you can do that. Postponement. Well, you might think, well, we needed 1,000 products. That was our order. But do we really need to have 1,000 products delivered next Friday? Can we settle for maybe getting 200 this next Friday and then 200 every week after that? You're kind of postponing the deliveries. But then you can also look at it as, do we really need to order this product now? Well, let's postpone it for a month and then we'll order it. You can do all these kind of different things. And these are good supply practices. You just have to evaluate when is the best time to use some of these, especially when you're doing hedging, near sourcing, and postponement. So look into these. So that was this topic. And now we're going to start moving on and we're going to talk about reducing risk. through good supply practice in our next video.